My name is Jacob Wiggins, and this is my presentation. The passages that I chose to analyze are from chapter 10 of Just Mercy. In this chapter, he talks about mental illnesses and how they relate to prison and incarcerated inmates. Says that prisons are like warehouses for the mentally ill because of how many of the inmates are diagnosed with a mental illness. He also states how guards are not trained to deal with them and the illnesses that these inmates may have. An example he gives was George Daniel, who had received brain damage from a car accident, and because of this, he had acted weirdly and strange. He was arrested after he had shot the officer in the stomach, which caused him to pass away from the injuries. The officer had previous write-ups and was known for being aggressive, which led to escalation, leading to Daniel accidentally shooting the officer. The first passage I chose was the one where he states how 50% of incarcerated people are diagnosed with a mental illness, and he also states that prison guards are often not trained to deal with or understand the mental illnesses that the inmates have. In this passage, he uses logos, where he says 50% of those incarcerated are diagnosed with a mental illness, and where he says there are 3 times more people in prison that are mentally ill than those in hospitals. This shows a big flaw in the criminal justice system and how people are not being given the right treatment to rehabilitate themselves to go back into society after their time in prison. And it also shows that guards need to be trained to deal with these people for their safety and for the safety of the inmate. In this video by Vice, they explain how the process of checking inmates for disabilities or mental illnesses goes along. In the first part of the video, they were checking in inmates that had been arrested for the night before, and they asked many questions regarding their mental health and where they believe that they are at. Many of these inmates explain how they have thoughts of hurting themselves or killing themselves and are put on watch list. This shows that there are steps being made towards the right direction and making sure that inmates are cared for correctly regarding their mental health. It also shows that many inmates are not quiet about them needing help and that they are open to it and receiving it. And the second passage I chose was also from chapter 10 of Just Mercy. It is the passage that explains how George was arrested and how the brain damage had affected him. This passage explains how George was going from house to house and would just enter the houses without being invited in. This led to one of the homeowners to call the police on him. The officer who answered the call had a history of being aggressive towards suspects, and this led to him escalating the incident and ultimately led to George and him struggling for the officer's handgun, and he accidentally shot the officer. This shows how, for the officer's safety and for the suspect's safety, they need to be able to deal with the mental illnesses of suspects and people who are being arrested. If it is not trained for the officers, then it is going to lead to more problems than it is going to help. This passage made me think of recent events, specifically the one between George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, where Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd by putting his knee on his neck. Derek Chauvin had many incidents before this where he had used excessive force. He had shot multiple suspects who were not posing a serious threat to him or his health or safety. And it just goes to show how there needs to be more training for officers to show control and make sure that they are able to de-escalate situations without using lethal force. Although the justice system has come a long way from where it previously was, there is still a long way to go. Bryan Stevenson's experience showed this greatly, as many experiences that he had dealt with many years ago are still shown today. There needs to be many improvements so that the people who are put into the criminal justice system are not being abused and are being rehabilitated so that they could come back into society.